Hi, Tonya. Zemira here. I'm reaching out to you, and I'm hoping that this outreach finds you, your family, and anyone in your sphere of life and influence happy and healthy through this difficult time. I'm sending this to you because I owe you an apology. I've been getting calls from my friends, my Eurocentric brother, and my white friends who are concerned about me, and I greatly appreciate that. Genuinely, they reached out, "Hey, Zemira, are you okay?" That kind of thing. And I'm not the only one. Black folks are getting that who have relationships with white folks around the country, all over the place. I mean, we're all getting those kinds of outreaches, which is heartfelt and appreciated. But I'm reaching out to you because I owe you an apology. Now, but before I get to the apology itself, I wanted to explain what prompted this apology. You see on the screen I have these two pictures, and I'll speak to them in a moment because they are central to how this George Floyd disaster really impacted on people like me. You see, George Floyd, all you have to do is have had a similar experience. And if you're African American or if you're black in America, you didn't have one or two of these. You had thousands of these. They weren't to the end of death, but they were everything from the paper cut level injustices and annoyances all the way up to major confrontations and everything in between. And these were thousands of them. Thousands upon thousands of them. And everyone in your family had thousands of them. And so the George Floyd thing just brought all of that to the surface. Now you have to bury it so that you can function, right? Well, when the George Floyd situation happened, it brought all of those paper cuts and injustices to the surface for me as well. It was part of the reasons why I got into broadcasting in the first place. Matter of fact, it was the reason. You see, my father's name was George. My brother's name is George. My grandfather's name was George. This picture right here that you see, this picture right here, that's George William Jones Sr., my grandfather. I never got a chance to know him. My father didn't get a chance to really know him because he was killed when my father was 3. The same way that George Floyd was killed, my father was killed. There was no retribution. There was no marching. It was like, hey, that's what happens to black people when you get in their way. He didn't break any laws. He worked for a white family. And he showed up to where he'd been working for years, developing a relationship with the family. The children thought he was part of the family, as all white folks did when they had their servant black people working for them. He showed up one day, the little girl in the family ran outside to say hi, and her shoe was untied. He knelt down to tie her shoe, and white folks just didn't like that. You know, getting that close and touching a little white girl. So they beat him to death. Now, I've never had that experience, but I've had 1,000 upon 1,000 others, like every other black person that you know, and most of them they don't talk about because you don't want the race card thing to come out. You know what I mean? On the other side, on this side, that's another grandfather and his slave receipt of $450. The last time he was sold, he went for $450 to Colonel James Hicks. One Negro man, $450. So all these kind of injustices all kind of fold together because George Floyd was killed for $20. We're going backward. But I want to thank you for being who you were. You've always been respectful to me. There are a couple of exceptions, but for the most part, you were very supportive. At least that's the way you came across to me. But I wanted you to understand why I went to ABC and why I was there. And there were many injustices. And you're not the only person that I'm reaching out to thank. Rather than waiting for white folks to come and have their condolences to us black people, there's some white folks that stood up for me early on. Tom Bresnahan, who's going to get a video from me, because he did something that most white managers in blue chip companies like ABC wouldn't think of doing. He hired a black man at a time when his job was on the line. And he got heat for it. He wouldn't admit it openly, but I know he got heat for it. And he was nervous as I don't know what. But he did it anyway because he knew it was the right thing. He knew I was the best person for the job. See, I had been a general manager and general sales manager for 10 years. I don't know if you even know how I got to ABC. I didn't come to ABC like all the white GMs that you worked with came. They came through the front door. I came through the back door. I had been a general manager and general sales manager for 10 years with another company, an inferior company to ABC, and turned around 2 radio stations for that company that were writing red ink. So I knew how to turn stations around. I had developed the chops for it. But I wasn't getting the big offers. So I went to one of my white GM friends in town here in Washington. He was running one of the best stations in town, and he respected me for what I was doing in a very compromised situation. And I went to see him. I said, how come I'm not getting the big job offers? You know what my skill set is. He said, Zemira, you're just on the wrong team. He didn't say, well, you're a black guy or, the racism stuff. He said, you're just not on the right team. If you're on the right team doing what you're doing now, your career will be totally different. I said, wow, you're probably right. I'm working with a second-rate team. So what did I do? I made a list of the top 5 media companies. Didn't matter where the ratings were. You know how most people look at, well, this station's doing better right now versus that station. This will be, and I'm sales oriented, so let me go to the best station to sell and make sure it's not an urban, because I was working for an urban-centric station at an urban-centric company. That was one of the problems. But I said, no, I'm going to take his advice. I'm going to look at the best companies, the ones that are run well, that have great reputations. So I made a list of the top 5. And at that time, ABC was number 1. And this just happened to be at the exact same time that WMAL had the franchise for the Washington Redskins. They had it for 44 years. And the Redskins had won the Super Bowl. So this is March, April, somewhere in there that I'm reaching out. And the problem was because the January Super Bowl was won by the Washington Redskins that year, Jack Ken Cook, who owned the Redskins, he decided, I want the highest rights fee. And Tom Bresnahan was negotiating with someone who decided he wanted much more money than MAL or ABC would ever think of paying for. But the 2 logos were identical. I mean, you say MAL, you meant the Redskins. You said Redskins, you meant MAL. So Tom thought, well, you'll never leave us. You've been with us for 4 decades. Jack Ken Cook called his bluff. You see, ABC had never lost a major sports deal. All the big AMs had them, even John Hare. They all had them, so they were scared to death when Jack and Cook pulled the plug and left MAL. The underpinning, the revenue for MAL was completely at risk because, 2/3 of their revenue came from football. So here I am after making my list of top 5. Tom is losing a contract with the Redskins, and all the salespeople and all the staff were in shock. 2/3 of this huge 6-figure per person sales team leaves. 2/3 of them go to every other station, spreading the poison that MAL was dead. But ABC was still on my list. So here I am calling Tom Bresnahan, who's got arrows sticking in him every which way. And I said, Tom, I want to come there. I'm the only person calling saying I want to go there. The door was swinging open with everyone running out the front door. I'm going in the back. I met with Tom in his office and said, look, I've been a GM and a general sales manager for 10 years, but I've been doing it with second-rate companies, and ABC is top of the list. I want to be doing what you do. I want to be a general manager with ABC. He was impressed because he knew me. I mean, we were in a lot of the same, local media organization, and he knew that I was a halfway decent broadcaster. He said, I'd love to have you, Zemira, but I'm letting go managers. I don't have any room. So I said, I don't think you understand. I'm not asking you to do me any favors. I'll make my way and show that I could be a great GM. I just need a way in. He said, well, I'm sorry, I can't hire you. I'm not hiring anybody. I'm losing people and I'm cutting costs. I mean, our revenue is tanking. The ratings were already going down. They were already old in the tooth in demographics, and the only thing they had going for them was their morning show they still had and the Redskins. And now they lost that. So I told Tom, you have a desk and a phone, don't you? He said, what do you mean? I said, do you have a desk and a phone? So what are you saying? I said, I'll take a sales job. If you have a desk and a phone, I'm here. He was shocked. I didn't negotiate any big deal or anything. I just said, give me a desk and a phone. I'll make my way. He was so shocked and impressed. He said, come with me. He walked me. If you remember the layout of MAL, his office was on one side of the building and sales was on all the way on the other side. He walks me all the way down the hall. He walks me in the GSM's office, interrupts him and said, you need to sit down and meet with this guy right now. In other words, hire him. So he hired me. And I started off as an account executive at WMAL in Washington. My friends, or people in the industry that call themselves friends, quietly would whisper, look what happened to Zemira. She's a buck private again. Poor Zemira, not knowing that it was a conscious decision because I had sidestepped GM offers to take an account executive job with MAL. I didn't negotiate any big deal or anything. They gave me a little list. I quickly blew that up, though. But more importantly, I saw neglected salespeople around me, and I started taking them under my wing. Matter of fact, one of the people that was totally ignored, no one trained her, no one helped her, I did while I was an account executive. She turned out to be in a few years a top biller of the station and stayed top biller of the station, making about $300,000 a year. And to this day, she has said, Zemira taught me how to do this. About 6 months after I started as a salesperson, the station's still struggling. The worst thing happened. And you may remember this. Jackson Weaver of Hardin and Weaver, the legendary morning show that was Number one in Washington for 33 years. My father woke up George Jones, the second George Jones, not this one on the page. He's George Jones Sr. My father was George Jones. He called himself Senior too, but he was really Junior. And my brother is George Jones too. He would wake up to Hardin and Weaver as a kid. I would hear the station Hardin and Weaver as a young child, knowing I was going to be the guy that saved that station. So by the time 6 months had gone by, Jackson Weaver suddenly dies. Now the last pillar that was holding up a station that was ailing in revenue, ailing in ratings, ailing in morale and reputation, had suddenly died. So guess what? They decided, well, this sales manager's not cutting it. We're still in free fall. So they fired him. And, we do succession planning, and, you had the other guys that had been sales managers before me that were in line. He and Shrut met with him. He wanted more money than what they were offering. Shrut said, what? Oh, who else you got? Oh, well, so we got this color guy. He's been in sales and been a GM for a decade. What? Bring him in there. I didn't negotiate. I took the job. By the time I took the job, there were only 4 salespeople left. I'm telling you this for a reason, Tonya. 4 salespeople left, station in free fall. Bresnahan is waiting to get fired at any day. And he took a risk on me. He didn't have to. He could have hired somebody else. So I appreciate him. He stood up when he had every reason not to. He was nervous about it. It was obvious, but he stood up anyway. That was Halloween, 31st of October, 92. Only 4 salespeople left, 5 salespeople, and one of them left right after. Matter of fact, I was sitting next to the guy. I know he was lousy. He wasn't working. So the reason why there were 4 left, and once I knew that Tom was going to hire me, about a week or so before nobody knew that I was going to get this job, I talked him into taking another job so I wouldn't have to fire my friend. The guy was sitting next to me because I knew he wasn't right. So I only had 4 salespeople left. The short of it was, I turned around that operation, handpicked a whole new team, brought people in that would have worked for me, even though the station was not something anybody would want to sell. Better people than MAO could have hired just on my rep. But what happened was that first full year, we blew the doors off. 7 figures over the budget. Just crushed it. Now, ABC all the way up to Tom Murphy were very concerned, and so everyone had a microscopic focus on MAL because we had never lost a sports franchise, and the concern was this was a trend that would affect New York, LA, Dallas, all Atlanta, all the big AMs that we had that had big contracts. So everyone was focused on what this color guy was going to do. Well, we made MAL more profitable without the Redskins than it had ever dreamed of being with the Redskins. And Tom said, if you can keep doing this, you'll get what you told me in the office. You'll get to be a GM in this company. 3 years straight, I nailed it, blew out the numbers each year. They kept raising the budget, we kept blowing it out. That team that I put together when I started, never lost one of them. I had 0 turnover. So Halloween, 3 years later to the day, Bresnahan said, well, we want to talk with you. We think we've got your market. I interviewed with Norm Shrut, thinking I was going to interview with the FM station that they had posted, the posting that you guys would have to do for EEO and all that. They posted the FM, but really they were going to let go Tom Tradup. I'm thinking I'm interviewing for the FM. I think they're going to, the way they positioned it, We'll split the two stations, have a FM GM and have Zemira do the FM. But when I got down to Shrut, he said, "Nah, we're hiring somebody else for the FM. We're going to do country there. We're going to give you the problem." See, the problem, if you remember, Tonya, was this was after the 1996. This was right when the 1996 Telecommunications Act had come through, and all the media companies were buying up stations, left and right. Everybody was getting big. They were able to do bigger deals in more markets, more revenue, dominate spectrum buys. And ABC wasn't buying any stations. And all the GMs were like, we want to get in the game too. All the way from Warren Buffett, all the way down to the president of the radio group, all said, no. We're not going to give you the money. Why? Here's what they said. You may remember this, maybe not. Why should we give you money to buy more stations in more markets when you can't fix the stations you have? There's one station that had been losing money for 10 years straight. It was called within the company the Vietnam of ABC. You had two managers thrown at it. The latest, Tom Trapp, couldn't turn that station around. Writing red ink for 10 years. Trapp was there for 6. Norm Shrut said, no, I'm giving you the AM. I said, why aren't you giving me the FM? Well, we have somebody else for that. I'm giving you the AM because I know you'll fix it. So I'm in Chicago, there to fix a station that everybody hates, the lowest rated station in the market, and have been writing red ink forever. But here's where it's different. Here's how it becomes one of the paper cuts post George Floyd. See, unlike my Eurocentric brethren, there were GMs. They were successful or they failed on their own merit. But for me, I just didn't represent me. I represented any black person that white folks would consider hiring at ABC or anywhere else. There's two ABCs. There's the ABC that wants to do right, and then there's the rest of the ABC. I know you don't want to, talk about the ugly ABC, but everyone has it because we're human. So that was just one of the paper cuts. The other paper cut was I really was looked upon and managed differently than everybody else, but that just goes with the territory. See, I was the only GM that was interviewed all the way up to Bob Iger. Bob Iger interviewed me before I got that job. Shoot, Tom Bresnahan was jealous. He said, shoot, I've never even met with him. But even when you get a sign-off, you have to be signed off at a higher level if you're black. You have to do, as my parents taught us, twice as much to get half as far. Before I talk about WLS and my apology, as I got there, those 3 years where we were just nailing it and saving Tom Bresnahan's job, I had a counterpart who was like 4 doors down from me in the office. My sales team was right outside my door. His sales team was right outside his door. Jim Robinson, good guy. Never had any run-ins with him. We worked together fine, but he had a completely different job than I did. His job was brain dead easy, and he didn't know that I played a role in his brain dead easy job. Let me tell you a story that nobody really knows. None of the suits where you work know, I'm sure. WRQX was a juggernaut because, I'm not taking anything away from good broadcasters running it, it was the format. Now, remember that station I was working for, that second tier station where I wasn't getting all the great jobs before I went to MAL? Well, we were trying to figure out how to fix it. And we, in the corporate office of the broadcast group, United Broadcasting Company, happened to be in Washington, D.C., in Bethesda, Maryland. And so all the management of our local station met with corporate to figure out, how do we fix this ailing station? And before I left. And I came with my own strategy. And everyone came up with their own, well, we should do this, we should do that. And I came up with something totally different. You know how you're in these group meetings and everyone's going back and forth brainstorming, and then one person says something and it just, bang, that's it. And it completely changes the atmosphere of the meeting. Well, that's what I brought to that meeting. I said, we've been doing this urban thing all this time. There's an opportunity that doesn't come very often. The hottest new format in radio today is hot AC. And the only market in the top 10 that didn't have a hot AC station was Washington, D.C. That's what we should do. Don't do urban, do that. And they said, yes, that's it. So all these little sub meetings broke out in the whole group. I mean, these guys talking about promotion, these guys talking about revenue, and programming guys talking about who could we hire. That's how it started. A few weeks later, they had hired the program director and air personalities, and they did it all on the down low, as quietly as they could, so they could surprise the market. You know, one of those sneak attack format flips. But they weren't very good at it, and because of their reputation, they had a hard time hiring people, so it took them longer than necessary, so it got out. And the programming people at RQX, that was a struggling rock station, got wind of it. How do I know this? Because one of the account executives that used to work for me left me during this time and went over to RQX, the struggling RQX. When they heard what we were going to do, their light bulb went off. And they decided, because they had a good reputation, it was ABC, it didn't take them as long to staff up and get ready. They flipped the switch the day before we were supposed to hot AC. I got the call from my salesperson, and you can verify this. She's a senior executive with Viacom right now. She went to law school after she left, did very well, and now she's a major suit in Viacom. She'll tell you, yeah, I called Zemira and let them know. And Jim Robinson got that job. I'm not taking anything away from him, but my kids could have sold that. So here's Jim Robinson. Goes home at 4:30 every day. Stations sold out for weeks. And his job was just inventory management. He never created any formats. He never fixed any major problems for ABC. And he ended up being a president of the network. That's what privilege looks like. I go to Chicago. Two white guys that couldn't fix the station got it profitable in a year. The lowest rated station in the market. In 3 years, got it in the top 5. And within 5 years, I got as high as the top 3 stations in the most competitive talk market in the country. There was no general manager, black, white, whatever, who had ever taken a major market, low-rated AM, and got it in the top 5. No one's ever done that. And no one, to my knowledge, has done it since I've done it. I three or so years into this miraculous turnaround that nobody at ABC thought WLS would be as successful as it was. My second turnaround. I picked up John Hare one day from the airport. And rather than say, hey, you did a good job here, that everyone else in the industry was saying, you know what he said? Oh, I would have done it faster than you. What took you so long? Now, when he and the company had it for 10 years by themselves, they lost money on top of money. That's a privileged thinking, right? But it wasn't just that. My friend Greg, he didn't last after the first year. They got rid of him. They gave me the FM. It was then the lowest rated FM in the market. I got it in the top 5 in men 25-54 in 6 months. But we lost that because Mark Steinmetz wanted to ride on the coattails of the success. I had a great program director, and we organized a whole strategy. So he wanted us to stay young like his Minneapolis station. So Minneapolis comes again, just like with George Floyd, Minneapolis getting in the way. And we told him where the sweet spot was, stay older, 45 plus. And he said, no, I want you to be just like my station in Minneapolis. Well, we weren't Minneapolis. And he forced us to do his plan, and the ratings went back down. And then he blamed me for it. All documentable stuff. We fixed the station, and he broke it. Then Bob Iger decides, I don't want 5 Radio Disney stations losing money. I want 6. I want one in Chicago. So he mandates that we buy a Radio Disney station in Chicago. I put the performer together. And then when it got out that we were doing this, Mickey Luckoff, good friend, he reaches out and calls me and says, Zemira, I'm so sorry to hear that you got one of these albatrosses. My condolences, he said. See, no one had ever made any money for the company or themselves with Radio Disney. It just made their day longer. I mean, so they all said this was a dead business model. There's no money for 6 to 11-year-olds. Arbitron doesn't even measure it. That's why he called me with condolences. I said, oh, because, got to do twice as much, go half as far. So I don't want to be like one of them. I'm going to show that it's possible. So I came up with a completely different business model than any other GM was doing. Innovative. I hired the right station manager, had no idea. I met with her at lunch. Karen Eskin, she says, Zemira, I don't know anything about running a station. I want you to be my station manager. I'll teach you what you need to know, and I'll give you a strategy that'll work. And it worked. Radio Disney was profitable in a year. And it was astounding to everyone because the Burbank Radio Disney station still hadn't made money, and they were a 50,000 watt blowtorch of a signal. My signal only covered a third of Chicago Metro, and we were outbilling them and everyone else, and did it within a year. And it became profitable and the highest billing Radio Disney station for the entire time that I was there and running it. Jim Robinson never did anything like that. All he did was decide what rates needed to be charged for the highest, hottest format that he didn't create. Yet he ended up being a president with ABC, and I ended up having to apologize to you. So when black people see George Floyd, they see all the injustices. They see HR from Disney calling me with a complaint. See, after Mark Steinmetz interfered with our strategy for the FM, great ratings, and he was trying to, make it look like he's responsible for it so he could move up. He ruined my FM and forced us to make a new format to alternative rock. Remember ZZN? So we're about to do it. We launched the format, and the day we launched the format, I'm having a management meeting with my entire staff. And my competitor, Q101, owned by Emmis, they sent us a dozen dead black roses. Welcome to the Rock War was on the card. So I'm in the meeting with my staff. I said, we're going to show them. They upset this Negro. Called myself a Negro. The thing that my grandfather's slave receipt said, the thing that's on my birth certificate, the thing that I was called until I was in my 20s on everything that was legal. I called myself a Negro in front of privileged white folks. And then I got a call a few days later from the New York Human Resources Department about a complaint against me for calling myself a Negro. I laughed at first, and then I saw she was serious, but it was a nervous conversation because she knew this was just ridiculous. But it was the culture of ABC that no one talks about. And I said, she was Italian. I said, if I was Italian and I said this, and I called myself an Italian, would you be calling me? She didn't have an answer to that. I was an anomaly, Tonya. There were no black people running major market news talk stations. Very few running any stations, let alone the spectrum of stations with the caliber of media company. I was an enigma to a lot of people. Black people all over America followed me. I didn't ask for that. The industry followed everything I did, and I probably got more press because of it than I wanted to or deserved. They all knew that this was strange to have a black guy be this successful in this many formats, doing this many things, when we don't see that anywhere else. R&R called me and wanted to do an article. Basically, why aren't there more Zemiras? I mean, it was obvious. I was the only one. So they wanted to know, why aren't there more black people in positions of influence in the media business? And I told them the truth, because that was the reason I got into this business, was to speak truth, not just to the public, but to white folks who are unconsciously incompetent about their privilege. They're running around talking race car when they don't realize they were born on third base and thought they hit a triple. So that's what I told the reporter. There are people that make decisions who don't understand privilege, white privilege, because they're like fish, and fish discover water last. Those are the two comments. Remember that? Remember how you called me and said, we need to meet with you offsite at a hotel to intimidate me, the interrogation you were part of? That was disgusting that you were part of that. You should be ashamed of that. Or maybe you're not. Maybe you've justified that was the right thing. But I bet you didn't call Mickey Luckoff, who's been in the press 10 times more than me. And so Hare was trying to intimidate me. He didn't do that stuff to the white managers. Why? Because he didn't like me telling the truth. He didn't like me talking about how there are some broadcasters who were born on third base and thought they hit a triple. They just thought they were better. Black folks just aren't good enough, they don't work hard enough, they don't whatever. That's why you don't see them in these jobs. He didn't like that. Remember? That was the beginning of the end for me. I knew that. I've been black most of my life. I'd seen it before. I hope that you have learned from all of your experiences. It's been my experience, though, that it took something like George Floyd and cameras on it to see the obvious. This is why black people are upset. Black people are upset for different reasons than why white people are upset. It's the same focus. We want the same outcome. Well, white folks just don't want it to be outed about their biases, about their privilege. As long as we can kind of get along. So I thought about it when I attended last year the going away for the RQX format. Jim Robinson was there, and a lot of the old guard from ABC all showed up for the party. And I don't have anything against Jim, but when I see him, I think about how he had this great opportunity, and he did a good job, but he didn't solve any problems. And everyone that worked with him knew he was just another white guy who was friends with the suits. So my apology is around the whole concept that until the camera is on, a lot of white folks just don't get it. And I had a chance to turn the cameras on, and I didn't. I didn't because, as I mentioned earlier, when black folks are in this business or in any kind of position of influence, whether it's corporate, religious, government, we're looked upon differently. See, Jim Robinson represented the Robinson family and Jim Robinson. I'm just using him as an example. There, I could talk about other people, but he's convenient. But when the Zemira Jones fail, I disappoint people. I don't even know their name. The first week I showed up at WMAL in Chicago, the corporate, human resources folks, they put me up in a corporate apartment not far from the station. And I'd run down to the corner to the Trader Joe's grocery store to get a few things. My first week there in Chicago, my wife's still back in Washington at our house there. And I walked through the cashier's line. It was a older black woman who was ringing up my few items. She kept staring at me. And it was a little uncomfortable because I didn't do anything wrong. Paying for the food. And she said, "I know who you are. We're proud of you." I remember this woman to this day. I never saw her again. That's the experience we have, Tonya. As good as you are, you never had that experience probably. I know Jim Robinson didn't. I know John Hare didn't, because he just represents John Hare. So when you called me that day and said, well, did he know? I thought about, if I told you the truth, it would have been a completely untenable situation because the cameras would have come on. I didn't want the cameras to come on. Why? Because my success was tied to too many other people. The cashier at Trader Joe's, Tom Bresnahan, who stood up for me when most people wouldn't, Norm Shrut, who took arrows by hiring me. I respect them for going out on a limb, doing what other white folks would have never done. You know, my first week or two at WLS, one day, Norm calls me, and he's already laughing as I'm saying hello. Hey, boss. I said, what are you laughing about? He said, do you know I'm getting all kinds of calls saying, are you crazy? Is this some kind of EEO experiment? To him for hiring me to turn around WLS. You see, Jim Robinson didn't get those kind of calls. When they put you in that position, no one called and said that. Or Steinmetz. These are privileges you don't even think about. So if I told you the truth when you called me that day, the truth that you already knew the answer to, you're a good lawyer. You never ask a question unless you know the answer already. You knew I wasn't telling the truth. Because if I did, the cameras would have been on. And it would have been a George Floyd moment. Yeah, I may have been taken out because I was speaking truth to power kind of thing. I was unstable. You move out black people who are a problem. You move out anybody that's a problem, especially black folks. But what would that have made? What would that look like for Tom Bresnahan, who stuck his neck out for me? Norm Shrut, who stuck his neck out for me. Callahan, who really promoted me. Hare hated all of that. So when that article came out, the one where I said, well, there are some people in the industry who were born on third base and thought they hit a triple. And fish discover water last. It takes a while for white folks to have an aha. Look how long it took to have a George Floyd situation. They've been doing that to black folks forever. See my picture of my grandfather? White folks knew this was happening. So, it's just the cameras. It's changing the identity of people that motivates them, not the truth. So if I had put a camera on, if I told the truth, it would eventually come out. And not only will those three people look bad, it would have hurt the person that looked like me coming behind me. Well, what would happen if I hired another person and they blow up like Zemira Jones did and hurt my career? That's what white people think. So they don't want to take the chance. So I lied. And as a Christian, that bothers me. So I apologize. I also know that ABC is really good to me. So I don't have ill will about ABC. They can't help what their parents taught them about their whiteness. They're just a victim of the lies that their forefathers told them. But I knew that if this came out, how you guys treated me with that, it wouldn't have ended well for a lot of people other than me. You all didn't know that I came from a family of civil rights activists. You didn't know that my cousin was the executive director of the NAACP, who would have salivated at something like that. You didn't know that. I didn't want you to know that. It had been too intimidating. I see what happens when, gracious, I scare people just walking down the street, clutching their pocketbooks. Last thing I need is a John Hare thinking he has to walk on eggshells for a black person he doesn't like. Bob Iger doesn't know this whole story. I'm sure he got the spin. You know, it was just one underperforming Negro that we gave a chance to at ABC, and he just didn't get the job done. Oh, yeah, okay, check. But the same article, the exact same article that had you call me and march me over to that hotel to play that intimidation game you should be ashamed of, that exact same article that you all were telling me, or Hare was telling me, was so terrible, I got a written note from the senior executives in New York saying how wonderful the article is, how proud they were. This same article. That would have all come out. And they would have said, what in the world were you smoking, Tonya? Yeah, Hare's stink would have fallen on all of you guys for playing that. Just like the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Milley, who had to apologize for following the leader. That's what you did. But I understand. If generals can do it, heads of HR and legal can do it. But I would have helped you in the long run if I had just told the truth and not lied. So for that, I apologize. The only thing I ask you to do is just stand up next time. When you see egalitarianism take a back seat to bigotry, that was a problem. Because I know John Hare thought, oh, this is going to his head. He's on the front page of R&R. He's talking about white folks. And he had a black GM in the same article. And this really hurt me. A black GM, as an example of how black folks in all of media thought of me, he said, Zemira is like a god to us. That was on the front page of R&R, the same article you were berating me on. So if I put cameras on this, the ABC stink would still be on it. That's not about me. It's about their paper cuts. And all it would do is bring back all of the injustices that they've experienced in and around the media business. Just like George Floyd. We don't know George Floyd, but we have our own Georges. I have my own George. So all I'm asking you, I don't know what you're doing now. I don't know what your position is, maybe the same. But in whatever station in life you follow, I want you to remember this. You weren't on the right side that day. It wasn't a good look for you. You're a good person. Just try to avoid the George Floyd moments. And when someone says, hey, I'm going to put my foot on this person's neck, join me, don't sit on their back too. That's all I'm asking. Thanks for watching my video.